mainly. Lorenis, you said that you did research. You did very good research. You put together a good presentation focusing a lot on the Electoral College. You said it was a
Yes,
difficult topic for you. Well, it's a
it is.
difficult topic for most Americans and voters as well. Every 4 years, I feel, you called me an expert, but every 4 years, I have to review the information if I'm going to talk about it. It's one of those things that if you're a voter, you just kind of follow the instructions and you cast your ballot, and then you see how it plays out, and you don't necessarily know well the system underlying how then it is determined who won the election. And it really only matters for two things, I think. The first thing is how Donald Trump, our president, and Joe Biden, our former vice president, are conducting their presidential campaigning. Now, this is during the pandemic. They're not able to get out and about like they were. You might have also heard the news that President Trump and the First Lady have gotten a positive diagnosis for COVID-19. They have gotten expressions of support from leaders around the world, and even some of their political critics have wished them a speedy recovery, as we all do, as I do too. So this is not a normal campaign season, but still the focus of where they're going to spend their time, where they're going to spend the money that the Democratic and Republican parties have raised to support them, has to do with the Electoral College and how it's ultimately decided who won. And that is based on a system that grants what we call electors to each state, mostly according to the size of the population of the state. So I believe it's according to how many representatives they have in our Congress, and then two more, because every state, all 50 states, have 2 senators. And then the District of Columbia, which is not a state, but would like to be, but our federal city, it has 3 electors. So you end up with 538 electors. My home state of California has 55, I think. It's a very large population. And yes, the District of Columbia, not a state, but it has only 3. And some of the smaller states, Alaska, huge territory, small population. It will have many fewer electors than California does. So in most of the states, the electors then cast their votes for whichever candidate got most of the popular vote. And in most states, all of the electors then vote for the winning candidate of most of the votes. But in a few cases, it's decided in terms of the proportion of votes the candidate got, in the cases of Maine and Nebraska. So there are a few states with a lot of electoral votes where candidates are going to spend a lot of time. But then, in addition to that, there are also states that are seen as very important because no president has ever won without those states, or the winner of the election tends also to win that state. This is the case for the state of Iowa, which doesn't have a large population. The state of New Hampshire, not a large population, but that has to do with the primary elections. Well, how we select candidates, it's very early. And once we get to the general election, which we're going to have on November 3rd, the state of Ohio becomes very important because it is seen as what is sometimes called a swing state, a bellwether state, one of those states that the winner has to win, because it is always that way. Florida, also very important. So actually, some states have more importance, get more attention in the primaries, which happened, well, they started at the beginning of this year, the primaries. States that vote for in the primaries to select the candidates very early, like New Hampshire and Iowa, they are very important early on. But now a lot of attention gets focused on states like Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Florida, because they have a lot of electors in the Electoral College, and because they could go either way. So it gets very interesting. And in this pandemic, when a lot of the campaigning was online, virtual, and now even more so, it's just been a very, very, very interesting time. This year also, because of the pandemic, voters are able to vote early. I already voted. I voted by mail. And a lot of people have. That could also, that's different from years past, where you, in order to get an absentee ballot, what we call an absentee ballot, so you can vote usually by mail or by some other means than actually physically going to the polling place, you had to have a specific reason. You weren't going to be able to be in your home state where you vote on election day or some other reason. But this year, since I'm moving to Arkansas, I vote in the state of Arkansas, where my husband's from. They are allowing anyone who wants to vote absentee and therefore vote by mail by our postal service to vote that way. That's different from the past. And that just shows you that the Electoral College, that's in our Constitution. But how the procedures go, that is decided pretty much by each state. So yeah, it's very complicated. Some states use machines or certain types of machines. Others use other types of machines, and how you can, if you can vote by mail or not, that has been different from state to state. So you really have to know, when you are a citizen of the United States of at least 18 years of age and you have the right to vote, you really have to know your local laws and procedures and regulations to know how to vote. You really do have to be informed, not only about the candidates and about the issues, but about how you're supposed to vote. So there's a lot more to it that I could talk about, but I think I'll stop there. First of all, is there anything I just said that wasn't clear or anyone didn't understand?
Yes, I would like to invite everyone in this chat to don't be scared. And to have an order, we could start by giving each one of you the opportunity to speak. So the first one who wants to speak is Maria Ortiz. Are you there?
Yeah, uh, I wanted to ask because I know that in US it's not like here that you actually vote for the president. It's like a second degree election, but I don't really understand how you decide which president. I don't really get that. I think that each state has a weight, but I don't really know how you quantify like the whole election.
Well, in a sense, we do vote for the president. The president and the vice president, they run as a pair. The presidential candidate chooses a vice presidential candidate, and they run together as a team. Our sitting president, Donald Trump, with Vice President Mike Pence, and then Democrat, our former Vice President Joe Biden, with Senator Kamala Harris. The names that you see on the ballot that you cast are their names. And so I'm not marking the name of some elector I'm never going to meet and don't know. My ballot says all the candidates whose names are out there in the media, in advertisements. I am voting for them. But there's a secondary step. I am marking my ballot according to the candidate I want to win, kind of like Venezuela or anywhere. However, it's not going to be that you just count up all of the people who voted for one candidate and all who voted for the others, and that's the result. There's an intermediary step, which has to do with the Electoral College. Each state, they will tabulate, they will count the votes, and then assign, and then the electors of that state, however, whether it's many because it's a large state with a large population, or just a few because it's a small state with a small population, they will then cast their votes based on the people's vote and how a majority of the people voted. Does that help at all?
Yeah, thank you.
It started because the framers of our Constitution in 1789 we had a largely agricultural, rural population, mostly based on the eastern seaboard. We hadn't kind of started expanding westward yet. And we didn't have so many things that we have today. We didn't have mass communication like we do today. We did not have universal compulsory education like we do today. And so it was thought at the time that you could not entrust a direct vote to the people. That has obviously changed. However, changing the US Constitution is a long, long process. And so to change the Constitution to eliminate the Electoral College, it's talked about every 4 years, especially when a candidate wins the popular vote, wins the majority of votes from the people, and still loses the electoral vote. That happened in 2016 with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. It happened in 2000 with Al Gore and George W. Bush. Every time that happens, people say, gee, why do we have this electoral college anyway? Well, those who favor it say that it provides some stability, because then even the smaller states, because it's based not only on population, but also every state gets 2 more electors, because every state would have 2 senators, they say it evens it out. They say that if we only had the popular vote, then candidates would only concentrate their attention and their efforts on large population centers, large cities, instead of rural areas, more remote areas. That's what they say. The reality is the Electoral College only convenes every 4 years when we have a presidential election. And I think in those ensuing 4 years, we have other things to worry about rather than a constitutional amendment. So that's our system.
Thank you for that answer, Rebecca. Up next, we're having Angel Patria. Angel, when you speak, please introduce yourself and say where you are. Okay.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Anna.
Okay. Hello, nice to meet you. My name is Angel Patria. I'm an Access student from Access Lecturia, and also I'm a student in social communication in Santa Maria University. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. I will ask something. I don't know if I can ask this, but I will. Uh, it was recently revealed that the United States President Donald Trump and the First Lady Melania Trump have tested positive for COVID, and but have been singled out for not having taken the necessary preventive measures. And this has caused a great controversy in social networks. So I will ask, do you think this could affect his campaign in any way? And if your answer is yes, can you tell us how it would affect?
Well, yes, Angel, that's the big news story today, that
Yeah.
unfortunately the president and the first lady both tested positive for COVID-19. They are now in a quarantine process, and we don't know how it will change things. We suppose it will. We suppose that it will. But let's also remember that this may not be the end of it. Anybody, of course, can get COVID-19. This is just the latest surprise in a year full of surprises. So we hope that they both have a speedy and full recovery, and we will see how it plays out. But yeah, certainly we will see what happens. The president and the first lady and their family, their son, by the way, Barron, he tested negative, which is good. That was good news. They have the access to the best medical care and round the clock access to medical attention. And meanwhile, I hope that everybody in the United States who has had their doubts about whether or not you should wear a mask, maintain social distance, and avoid crowds, wash your hands, all of that stuff. I hope that they realize that anybody can get COVID-19, even the president and the first lady. I hope it gets more people who were not taking it seriously to take it seriously.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer and for your suggestions.
Thank you, Angel.
All right. Up next, we're having Rosa Ideth Leal. Are you there, Rosa?
Yes, hello.
Remember to
Hi.
introduce yourself and say where you are, Rosa.
Okay. Hello, my name is Rosita Leal. I'm part of Access Lecturia, and I graduated from high school this year. I'm waiting for waiting for studying in the university. By the way, I would like to ask if what happens when or if a candidate is selected by fraud. I think it could not happen barely, but I would like to know what happened in that situation. What do you do when the president is selected wrongly?
I think what you're asking is what happens when there is fraud and a president gets selected in a fraudulent manner. I
Yes.
think, yeah. I think it depends. Was it fraud in one particular state? Was it fraud somehow on a national level? I think it would be hard to perpetrate fraud in all 50 of the United States, but there could be irregularities or fraudulent procedures, certainly in a state or a locality, or simply problems. In the year 2000, it wasn't that it was fraud in the state of Florida, but there were voting machines that didn't work well, that when you used it and it punched your choice in a card, which was the ballot, you couldn't really tell which candidate had been chosen, and it caused confusion because the election was that close. In years where a candidate wins by what we call a landslide, where any of these irregularities would not affect the outcome because the difference is too great, people don't worry about it as much. It's really only when elections are very close and very tight. I think the good thing is there's a lot of what we call scrutiny. There are a lot of different institutions that examine the procedures. There are the political parties themselves. There are authorities, election authorities in every state. There's the US Congress. There's the court system. There are NGOs and organizations such as the League of Women Voters and other non-governmental organizations whose mission is to ensure free and fair voting. There's also the news media watching very closely. Last time in 2016, there is evidence that Russia interfered by spreading disinformation, by getting access to personal email, such like that. Still, we have a system where the electors will still cast their votes based on the vote of the people. And then our Congress convenes in early January, on January 6th, to count the votes of the Electoral College and make it formally a formal determination of the official result of the election. So there's a lot of steps to go through. And at any one of those steps, if there's suspicion of fraud, there can be an investigation.
All right. Rosaidet says, thank you so much. Well, up next we're having Andrea Duarte. Are you there, Andrea?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hello, my name is Andrea. I'm part of Access Key Lecturia, and I'm studying engineering at the university. Well, my question is, what are the requirements that must be met to be a candidate for the presidency of the United States?
To run for president, you mean? You have to be born in the United States, the president and the vice president. You have to be 35 years old, but not much more than that. In theory, not just anyone, but almost anyone could run for president. However, it costs a lot of money to mount a victorious presidential campaign. You somehow have to make yourself known. Most candidates will do that by running for public office at a lower level so that they get experience in governance. They become known. They devote their life to politics and to public life. So they become known. They become experienced with either legislation or with perhaps running a branch of our executive branch. Hillary Clinton had been Secretary of State, in addition to a senator, for example, in addition to being First Lady when her husband was president. So the only requirements really are being born in the United States and 35 years old. There may be one or two more that I'm missing, but those are basically it. And yet, if the average person says, okay, I was born here and I'm 35, I'm going to run for president. Well, if you want to, you can do it. But if you want to get your name on the ballot, first of all, and you want to win, you might have to get the support of a political party, which if there are other people who have been active with that political party longer than you have, they're going to have better chances than you. If there are other people who are famous already in politics and the public knows them, they're going to have a better chance. Name recognition is a factor. So while on paper there are not that many requirements, in reality, you know, it's a long, hard, uphill climb. Now, that having been said, nobody had heard of Barack Obama in 2000 much, and yet 2008, 8 years later, he was elected president. He first served as a senator. And before that, he had been in local politics in Chicago on the grassroots level, working with communities and whatnot. Another example, President Jimmy Carter, who was elected in 1976. Before 1974, or no, 75 maybe, no one had heard of him. So he was the governor of the state of Georgia. So people knew him in Georgia, but not in the rest of the country. But somehow he had a meteoric rise and he was elected president. So you kind of never know. But campaigning also across all of the 50 states during a very long period of time, about a year when it's all done. You know, it's a long, grueling, expensive process. So you have to really want to do it, I think.
All right. Well, I don't have new questions in the chat, but while our participants say that they want to open their microphone, I would like to ask you a question regarding the electors in the Electoral College, Rebecca, because, I mean, how are these electors chosen to cast their vote?
They are people who are usually known within the state because they have been active in public life, in politics. There are some requirements in certain states that they can't hold public office or such like that, but they are usually people who are known to be people who are involved in civic, who are involved in public life, and who have experience, good judgment, that sort of thing, chosen by state authorities.
Okay, so these electors are really, it's an honor to be nominated by the own party, right? Because it is the party who nominates these electors, I guess.
Certainly it would be an honor, but these are people whose names we never know, really. I mean, I suppose that in a society where we have transparency laws, it could be known, but electors never become famous. I have no idea who the electors are for the state of Arkansas.
All right, I understand. Well, I think that we're
chosen by the parties within the state.
Oh, okay, I understand. Jorge Toro wants to participate. Jorge, are you there?
Yes. Hello,
Okay.
I'm Jorge Toro. I'm studying economics at UCB, and I am a scholarship holder of AVAA. My
Yes.
question is, why in the US there is why in the US the legislative seats are elected in different periods. Because I know that 2 years ago there were a legislative election where the result was a democratic-elect House of Representatives and a Republican-led Senate. But now, in this 2020 election, there is another legislative election. So my question is, why these legislative seats are elected in different periods?
That's a very good question. In the House of Representatives, that is the lower house, if you want to call it that. The number of representatives is 435. The 50 states have a number of representatives according to their populations. And the District of Columbia has a delegate. She's not a full-fledged representative because Washington, D.C. is not a state. Each member of the House of Representatives serves a 2-year term. So they have to run for office every 2 years. In the Senate is the upper house. Every state has 2 senators. That was a compromise within our Constitution, a balance of the population of the state and a certain equality by which every state gets 2 senators. They are elected for 6-year terms, and it's not just a 6-year term that's the same for all of them. It's about a third of the Senate every 2 years, but it's a 6-year term. So not every senator is up for re-election this time around, but all of the members of the House of Representatives are, and many state governors also are. So on a national level, everybody is voting for the candidates for president and vice president, although even then, the ballot from state to state doesn't have exactly the same list. But you can be sure that Donald Trump and Joe Biden are on the ballots for all 50 states. But then we have 2 main political parties, but there are also smaller parties. We've got a Libertarian Party. We have, I think we have an American Communist Party. We've got different socialist parties. We've got green and environmental parties. I think H. Ross Perot's Reform Party probably still exists. So depending on the state, there are other candidates who could still be on the ballot. And then in every state, there will be other officials up for election. For the House of Representatives, maybe probably at least one of their senators, probably. And then maybe the governor of the state, the head of the state's own government, the governor, maybe the mayor. I voted in Arkansas, and there was the mayor of the city of Fayetteville, several justices for the various courts. Let's see, president and vice president, House of Representatives, Senate. And then there were also issues, public questions that were on the ballot for Arkansas. So what the ballot looks like and the choices that you have to make or that you are asked to make when you vote, those vary depending on the state where you live. And again, the senators in the US Senate serve for 6 years, but it's not just one 6-year term. It depends on when they started their 6 years. And so it's about a third of the Senate. The House of Representatives, that's only a 2-year term, and that's the same for everybody. So they are up for re-election every 2 years. And so yes, every 2 years we have an election that for Congress, and in those, our last one, if we're talking about 2018, not only did we vote for members of Congress, but again, also some governors, And then within the state, it might be the state legislators. So that's why we have elections, large elections every 2 years, but the biggest ones are every 4 years. Does that answer your question? Thank you. I tried.
Okay, yeah, he said that it was a very interesting and complete answer.
Oh.
We're having Atenea Valentina. She has a question for you.
Okay, hi. I'm Atenea. I'm 19 years old. I am from Margarita, but I'm studying international affairs at the UCB. I am also an AVAA scholar. And my question is because I'm a former youth ambassador. I went to the States in 2017, and I went to Washington, D.C. actually. I loved that city.
I'm so glad.
And my question is, why is Washington, D.C. not considered like a state? Is it the same as here in Venezuela? I think Caracas is also not considered a state, but like the capital district.
That's true. The District of Columbia residents, I don't really know if most of them support statehood for the District of Columbia, but a lot of them do. That has been a movement for many years, statehood for Washington, D.C. But right now it is not a state. It is, well, the District of Columbia, our federal city, a special city sort of, that has a delegate, Eleanor Holmes Norton, in Congress, but she doesn't have all of the rights and privileges that the members of Congress have because the district is not a state, or not yet. People say that that's taxation without representation. It's very controversial. But statehood is also a process. Does anybody know the newest United States, the most recent states that achieved statehood? Anyone know? No one?
No, apparently, no, I didn't know.
Okay. Alaska and Hawaii in the late 1950s, if I'm not mistaken. The state of Alaska and the state of Hawaii.
Okay. Rebecca, Rosa has a question, but about vocabulary.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Rosa?
Okay, hello again. Years ago, I was reading about this topic and I found words that I didn't understand. And that is Super Tuesday, and I would like to know what it means.
Super Tuesday, that's a very good question. I talked about the primary elections a while back. That is how we decide who the candidates are going to be in the general election.
Yes, you did.
There's an earlier election. And on a certain Tuesday in February or March, there's a lot of states holding primaries, and a lot of those states are very important to the outcome of the general election. So it's called Super Tuesday.
I think that's the question that she wanted to ask about Super Tuesday. Up next, I have Oriana Castillo. Are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Oriana. I am a AVAA scholar and a medical student. My question is, how long does the campaign period last? Should there be a specific time between the nomination and election day?
That is a very good question. It really formally starts with the first primaries, and that's usually the state of New Hampshire holds an early one. The state of Iowa holds what we call a caucus, where people who are active in politics come together and they decide kind of among themselves who the most favorable candidates are, and those happen in the early part of the year. So it lasts formally from about January to November, but as you may have seen, preparation for that goes on much longer. Nowadays, a year before that, people are already talking about who the candidates are going to be. Potential candidates form what is called an exploratory committee to help them decide if they want to run for president or not, based on how much money they think they can raise, what the chances are of success, is it worth all they're going to have to do. So it's a long process, which keeps getting longer, it seems. It seems like sometimes it seems like we get no respite, that there's constant campaigning and we get no respite from it, because when you have major elections every 2 years, well, you know, but it gets much more intense between January and November of an election year.
All right. Right here I have Diego Perfecto. He also wants to ask a question. Diego?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Diego Perfecto. I am 19 years old and I am a photographer. I would like to know if it's possible or not that a person win the popular vote but lose the electoral vote, or if have this situation happened before.
Yeah, it happened in 2016. It happened in the year 2000. It happened once or twice before that as well. It hasn't happened very often, but it's happened more often in recent years. In my lifetime, it does happen.
Okay.
And
Sorry, continue, Diego.
And is there a reason of this? I mean, as I see this, this have been happening in more than one time. So, if for a specific reason or not?
Why has this been happening? That's a very good question. It probably has something to do, I suppose, with our politics nowadays. There are very, very strong feelings among Americans on issues. And you would think that social media might bring us together, but it has had a rather polarizing effect, I think. And if you have about half of the country thinking one way about our issues and about roughly half thinking the opposite way, that can make for tightly contested elections. And then it's a matter of how many people went to vote in a particular state that has a lot of electors of the Electoral College or not. So I suppose it's a combination of things. It's how we get our information nowadays, a lot from social media, around a 24-hour news cycle. I suppose it's a lot of different factors. When I was your age, younger than you, we only had the television networks and we had traditional newspapers and the radio. And there was a lot more trust in major media organizations and the information that we got. There were trusted news sources. And so, I don't know, I think it was, the tendency was for majorities, large majorities of people to think one way on an issue or about a person, whereas nowadays it's kind of all over the place. Depending on how you get your news. But still, we do have freedom of the press in the United States, and we do have the ability to find out things like Russian meddling in 2016 in our election, or we can go back and see the effect of social media, and we can trace disinformation, sometimes after it has been accepted as truth. That's a big problem. But at least we have means. There are a lot of websites. One is called Snopes.com, S-N-O-P-E-S. Their whole mission is to check facts. And there's a lot of organizations nowadays whose mission is fact checking, to try to determine what is real and what is fake news. And so we do have a lot of ways of verifying the information that we have. And we all have to take the responsibility to be educated voters. And it's not easy. You can see things on Facebook. You can hear things even on the mainstream news media. And it's easy to accept it as truth without questioning it, or as a falsehood without thinking, no, maybe that's true. So you really do have to, I think it's good to use different sources of news, try to consult news media that have perhaps different political orientations, and get a variety of sources and be very critical in your own thinking. But it's a challenge.
Well, thank you so much for your answer. I think those processes are very difficult to understand in that aspect, maybe because of the social media. I'm from Access Lecheria, and we are enjoying this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question, Diego. Thank you.
Hello, you all. I think I solved my problem with the microphone. How are you, Rebecca? Time runs by, so we have time for one more question, and I think Daniel Alvarez Laurenis is the last one that asks for a question. So Daniel, go ahead and ask your question, and then Laurenis is going to be closing our club today. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks again for all your passion and all the work that you have done for Venezuela. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hello, my name is Daniel Alvarez. I'm an access student from Maracay, and this is my question. What is the legal power and entity that have more power and at the moment of the elections in the United States, and why?
Well, let's see. In the presentation that Lorenis put together, it showed something that we call checks and balances that is supposed to limit the power of any one entity. We have 3 branches of government. Anybody remember what they are? Okay. Jorge, what are they?
Judicial, legislative, and executive, no?
Very good. Very good. Yeah. The legislative branch makes the laws. The executive branch enforces and applies and executes the law. And the courts, the judicial branch, interprets the law. There are other checks on presidential power. For example, the legislature, our Congress, they have the power to decide our budget. The budget that the executive branch gets every year is decided by Congress. That's a lot of power. The Senate confirms people who are nominated to hold some of our highest offices, cabinet positions, and some at the State Department, for example, assistant secretaries of state have to be confirmed by the Senate, our ambassadors also. That is a check on executive power. That says that the president can't just appoint whomever he or one day she wants. They have to be approved and confirmed by the Senate. That's a check on executive power. And then if there is a discrepancy or something is seen as unconstitutional, it can go to the courts to decide on the constitutionality of it. So these are checks on the power of the other branches. So for elections, because the states decide the procedures for how votes will be cast, that's a lot of power. Congress ultimately ratifies the result of the election. There's also power in that. And then the candidates themselves and the political parties, if you can get a lot of time in the news media and buy a lot of ads and you've got money, that also gives you power. And really, people also have power that we can choose to exercise or not. It is we, the people, ultimately, who vote them in or not. We're the ones with the power to cast votes. So we can complain about our elected representatives and our president and our officials and all of this. But if we didn't vote, we don't really have a right to complain. I'm going to
Thank you so much.
No, thank you. It was a great question. About how electors are chosen, I'm going to quote from electoralvotemap.com. It says there are 33 states that choose electors by party convention. So the parties in those cases choose. They come together and they choose. 7 states in the District of Columbia select electors by state party committee. So again, the parties. The remaining 10 states use gubernatorial appointments. So the governor of the state appoints electors. And so it varies. And in some states, it's a combination. So again, that is a lot of power in the states. You're talking about that. States' rights. That was one reason for our Civil War back in the 1860s. Yes, it was about slavery. And the larger question beyond that was states' rights. Who decides if you can have slavery or not? Is it the state or is it this loosely affiliated federal government at the time? We fought a war over that. We fought a war over federal power versus state power in the question of slavery. And I wish I could say that it was all over, but that remains very controversial today. What I do think is that is good. A silver lining of the pandemic has been that when George Floyd was very brutally arrested and killed at the hands of police officers, everybody was at home watching TV, and there was a tremendous outcry. I'm very, very sorry that George Floyd had to die for that. He was apparently a person who was turning his life around. He'd had problems. and he was changing his life to lead a better life. The officers in that case, though, were prosecuted accordingly. And that caused, as you know, a big groundswell and an examining of institutionalized racism in the United States that has persisted despite everything. Those of you who saw the film Hidden Figures, in which Katherine Johnson, after whom the American Space is named, what she had to go through, an educated, brilliant professional like she was, and the indignities she had to go through in the early 1960s when she was at NASA. I'm happy to say things have changed a lot since then. And still, it was eye-opening for many of us to see things that still go on that we don't necessarily know about unless we experience them ourselves. And so, but the good thing is we have freedom of the press so we can know about these things, and we have voices. We can protest, we can vote, we can write to our members of Congress, we can circulate petitions on change.org. There are a lot of ways we have to make our voices heard in our democracy, and it's messy and it has problems, but ultimately it's up to us, the people.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, because knowing that you can address this topic in a very open, honest, and assertive way, it's an honor for us, for the American Space, for our country. And I hope that each one of the participants in this session take advantage of it, of the knowledge that you have shared with us, and spread the word, try to take democracy and liberty of expression like something that we need to fight for, something that we don't that we don't need on fighting.
Yeah,
because it's not gonna be given away just like that. It needs to be fought for. So thank you very much, Rebecca. I'm sorry, I think that the time is up, so I know that some of the questions were not answered, but the time is up, and I hope that the other participants who couldn't get to ask you a question can write to my email, americanspaceifisa@gmail.com. And yeah, I can forward their questions to you, honestly. And well, do you have a closing message to say goodbye?
I would just like to thank you again for the invitation and for this opportunity. I'd be happy to do it again, as long as my colleagues at the Venezuela Affairs Unit, with whom Martha works, as long as they don't have any objection, I'd be happy to do it again. And on different topics, whatever you want, that I have some knowledge about. I congratulate you for having gotten the Access English Micro Scholarship, or the AVAA Scholarship, and having attained such proficient levels of English. That's excellent. It's so impressive. And I would just say how much I have been inspired by the people of Venezuela, and how you just keep on striving despite a lot of obstacles. And your persistence and your dedication, it is paying off. I know it's sometimes hard to see, but keep on doing it. And it's a privilege for us to be able to have American Spaces in Venezuela and such a strong network of them. It's a privilege to support them. And anything I can do to support, I'm always available. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for those words. Don't cry, anyone. Oh my goodness. I mean, it's really inspiring for me. important. I know that for everyone in this session. So let's say goodbye. Thank you so much, Marta, Claudia, Nitsi, Babsi, and all of the participants. I hope that you join in other sessions, and you're always welcome, Rebecca. I hope these allegiance go further in the future.
Hope to see you again soon. And I hope to see you eventually in Venezuela.
Thank you, everybody. Bye. Have a great weekend. Gracias,
Thank you.
jefa.
Thank you. Gracias, Martica.
Happy weekend to all. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Nitsi. Thank you, Laurenis. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.